right, we're going to get started. Hi, everyone. A big welcome to Second Nature Software Stormwater Compliance MiniCon for Southern California. Thank you to everyone who's joining us today. I'm Martinette Botha. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at Second Nature, and I'm really excited to be introducing our presenters today. Seth Brown is the principal and founder of Storm and Stream Solutions and the executive director of the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance. He's going to be our keynote speaker today. Seth is a registered professional engineer. He's had 25 years in the stormwater sector. He also holds a PhD in civil engineering from George Mason University. Francis Kelly is manager of the Global Partner Program at Esri, focused on state and local government, and he's going to talk to us today about Esri licenses and implementation. Francis has been with Esri for 4 years and actually comes from a former partner of Esri's and had formerly sat on Esri's Partner Advisory Council as well. Michelle Tanner is Senior Scientist at Second Nature and will be running through a software demo for us today. She uses her expertise in GIS and applied science to help customers integrate software, mobile applications, and GIS analysis into their everyday workflows. She's also played an important role in developing models that can be used for ongoing tracking of green infrastructure. And Jason Yoho is Second Nature's Chief Commercial Officer. He's responsible for customer relationships at Second Nature. Jason has spent 20 years in Silicon Valley helping customers understand how they can benefit from the cloud. Jason's going to give us an overview of Second Nature, how to get started with a digital web-based approach to stormwater management and compliance, and how this innovative approach unlocks the multi-benefits associated with investment in stormwater management and compliance practices. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Please feel free to ask any questions in chat. We will endeavor to answer everything throughout the conference, or if we don't get to it during the conference in chat, we will answer that at our Q&A session afterwards. You can also reach out to us directly by email. I have dropped all the presenters' email addresses in the chat window for everyone, so feel free to use that after the conference as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Seth. Thank you, Seth.
Thanks, Martinette. Okay, everybody, I'm going to kick things off. I'm only going to take about 20 minutes to go through my portion of the talk here, and what I wanted to do is kind of set the table for the rest of the talks today. And I'm going to talk about the organization I represent, the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance, or NAMSA, as well as the maturation of the MS4 sector. So that's the overall theme that I've got going. Martinette, if you can go to the next slide, please. And when I start, and I should also say before you go in too far here, I appreciate everyone being here, taking time out of their day. I appreciate Martinette, organizing all this in Second Nature. I appreciate the other speakers as well. So you guys are gonna, you're gonna hear some interesting information, and I think again these all tie together pretty well. And again, one of the themes here is the maturation of the sector. So I think about this through the lens of how I grew up, and I grew up in a large Catholic family, and I was the youngest, not only the youngest in my family, but the youngest of all my cousins. So we would go for Thanksgiving, we'd go to my grandma's house, which is what people do. And it was always like the adults table. They had all the nice silverware, and they had the first, cut out a lot of the food. And, we were sitting there on the tables that are like the fold up tables, and things didn't really, it didn't sit right. We're on little fold out chairs, and we had the plastic silverware. And we sat at the table. Not only was I at the little kids table, I was at like the littlest of littlest kids table, and I was inspired. I want to go sit at the adults table, because that's where the really serious conversations were going on. And the premise, Martin, if you can do 2 clicks, sorry, this is the animation here. The point here is that I think stormwater has for a long time been at the little kids table, right, in this context. And we've been aspiring to go to the adults table to be part of the serious conversations when we're talking about infrastructure. And I think that time has come. It's coming, and now, and it's getting there. Maybe we're moving up the chain, and we're about to be at the adults table. But that's the big theme here that I'm going to share some information that makes this point, I believe. But this is an exciting time in the stormwater sector, and really it's about finally getting to that level. Next slide, please, Martinette. And I think that to be a little bit more technical, not just kind of talking about American holidays, but the information on this slide comes from William Ruckelshaus, who was one of the grandfathers of or whatever the right term is for one of the authors really of the Clean Water Act. So back in the 1970, he and others started working on this together, and he became the first EPA administrator. Actually was brought back in the early 80s because of some scandals that took place. Only person who's done that twice. He's got a lot of credibility, and he was asked in 2010, so this is 10 years old, but it's still credible today. He was asked in 2010 to look back at 40 years at when they first started put the Clean Water Act together, and saying, what has changed? How, what has changed over this time? And his point was that back in 1970, when they first started putting all this together, there was 85%, so that blue part of that pie chart, 85% of the problems in this country in terms of water quality impairments were related to traditional point source. This does not include urban stormwater. So back then it was industrial waste, wastewater effluent. We had Cuyahoga River was on fire. In fact, it was on fire several times over several decades. And I don't know if people know that. They see that one image that really catalyzed things in the Clean Water Act, which is great. But it actually had been a long history, and they actually got to be really good at putting out their fires. And I always think like that is clearly an indication that we should do something when we're good at putting out fires on our waterways. So we did take action in the 70s and developed a Clean Water Act, and we first focused on those impairments of that are point source. But the thing is, we neglected the non-point source, including, and I know that those who are in the regulatory world would say, no, urban stormwater is a point source. Yes, it is regulated as a point source. It's kind of clumped in with ag in this context, just because it was easier to be consistent in the discussion here. The point is that the whole pie chart has shrunk. Clearly, we've got better waters, right? We don't have rivers on fire. We don't have those kind of smack yourself in the forehead like obvious issues that are not easy, but they're clear to see. But the distribution is exactly the opposite. Now 85% of our impairments are ag and urban runoff and things like that. So clearly, I just want to set the table. This is the water quality issue of our time right now. These are not easily done, but there's something that we can do about this, and we must do about it, and we will. And things are changing, and that's kind of the point here. So put a pin on this. I want to talk about for the next, if you can go forward 2 slides, please, Martinette. Talk about the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance. I'm going to get back to the maturation discussion, but I wanted to pause here because I've talked about NAMSA, and I want to give just a little bit of context. Where we're coming from. It's a national coalition of that focuses solely on the MS4 sector. There's a lot of I'm in the Washington, D.C. area. There's a lot of national organizations that are kind of, circle around the MS4 or include the MS4s, and that's great. Water Environment Federation is great. ASFPM talks about floodplain issues. That's clearly ties into stormwater programs, but there's no national group that solely focuses on MS4s only. So we said let's do this. There's all these state organizations, and let's pull them together and form this coalition, and that's what we've done. So the members are organizations, not individuals. Just to be clear, we've got 3 member types. Again, the core is these state and regional groups that represent 5 or more MS4s. CASCA, as an example, was a founding member. And that's an example of one of our core members. We've changed our bylaws to allow individual MS4s to join. So large MS4s, some of those actually encompass as much or more population than entire states or groups of states, like Harris County, Texas, for instance. So it makes sense to allow them in. It doesn't have to be just a large MS4, but that's another group member type that we have, and we also have affiliates, which is basically anybody else, regulators, technologists, law firms, manufacturers, and others. And we've got all of those folks in our organization. If you go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please, Martinette. Thank you. So the motivation for formation really came out of the lack of, we're just kind of a disaggregated, disparate type of sector right now, right? It's kind of similar to what our infrastructure is like. We're all over the landscape. We're not in one centralized place. We're not easily managed necessarily. So there's been some herding of cats, and I think it's just not been an easy thing to do, which is why it hasn't happened. But now it has to happen. And so what we wanted to do is pull together, create a network of MS4s programs across the country, connect and unite them, provide a unified voice. And instead of just being reactive, things come out, policies or whatever come out, and we say, hey, wait a second. We wish we knew about that. Wish we had something to say about it. We're always the last to know kind of thing. We want to be proactive as well as reactive. We want to be at the table. We want to be driving the discussion. We're starting to do that. and I can talk about that now, or I can try to talk more about it later if we don't have time, because I don't think we'll have time to cover everything. The other thing is we want to talk about the public image, and we want to raise awareness on stormwater as a thing. We want to talk about it as a positive thing, as a resource, not as a burden. Obviously, there's challenges. Obviously, it can be a burden with flooding. I understand that but it's also something we can capture and use as a resource. And we need to start thinking about it that way and valuing it that way, and valuing the infrastructure related to stormwater and all the co-benefits and all the good stuff about it. So that's really our motivation for the formation. If you can go to the next slide, please. Our vision is it's very simple: provide clean water for the nation. You know, sounds easy, but it's not that easily done. But that's what we want to do, because that's what the Clean Water Act does, and we're part of that. To do that, we need to do a couple things: provide efficient and effective programs, stormwater programs, MS4 programs, and we want to base our decisions on science. So, and we're a 501c3. We've been around since 2018, so we're only a couple years old. We were established in 2016, but we didn't get our IRS approval until 2018. But the point is, we're relatively new. And through the very beginning, we've always been focused on the technical issues, and we want to do more and more of that because we need to have more information, more science, more research to back up what our policies should be. They have to make sense in the technical aspect. Next slide, please. So I could go on for a long time about our action areas. I'll just say that there's 4 main groups. The first is, and the biggest mission for us, is providing support to the sector, providing information, whether that's information that's about, hey, there's a new regulation, there's a court case, there's a ruling, there's a new manual, whatever it is. We've got resources on our website that we've started and we're going to grow over time. But the whole point is to provide sector support through that, and even peer-to-peer exchanges. That's something that's occurred. Same thing with messaging and communication. Again, a peer-to-peer exchange, as well as raising awareness on stormwater issues overall, letting folks know, hey, this is coming down the pike. This is an important thing. We should be aware of it. And also communicating with public officials as well is a big issue. And it's obviously part of every MS4 program. It's a big deal. So, and related to that is education. We know that there's education needs, and we're an education-oriented organization. So providing technical information, whether we develop it ourselves or just, provide a platform for that. We're working on that. And lastly, we've been engaged with policy and advocacy, working and meeting. We've got a great relationship with EPA on several fronts. We're not just laying over, but we're also engaged in a positive and constructive way with EPA. We also provide areas where we disagree, and we have a dialogue that's positive. And we're also active on Capitol Hill in many ways too. So next slide, please. We are, just to let you know where we are in terms of coverage, we've got 23 states. So all the states in blue on that map are our members right now. Again, California is a founding member, Minnesota is a founding member, as an example. But again, we've only been around for 2 years, and we've got 23 states. The states in green are states that are about to join. So we've almost got, we could say we're almost covering half the states in the country. There's other states in that orange or red are states that we've been talking with. So hopefully we'll get up to 30 or 35 even in a couple of years, something like that. So we've got about half the country covered, more or less. We've got 11 or 12 affiliate members. You see them all listed there. Second Nature is right at the top as one of our key partners on events like this. And I'll also highlight other places where Second Nature is really helping out. Next slide, please. And just to let you know who's leading all this, again, I'm the executive director. You see me there wearing a suit and tie, which is something we all used to do, but we haven't for a while. We have Scott Taylor, he's our chair. He's been a leader in California. He was a leader with Casca. So California is definitely in the mix. I've been to Casca every year for the last, I don't know how many years, providing outreach and support and sharing what's going on at the national level. We also have Randy Neprash, who's with the Minnesota City Stormwater Coalition, so he's representing Minnesota, and then Jennifer Watson from Tennessee is representing the Tennessee Stormwater Association. Just so you know who the leadership is. Next slide, please. I also wanted to highlight real quickly, there's an opportunity for communities right now that's available. And we've, NAMSA set up a couple of centers of excellence. I wanted to highlight one, which is based upon the community-based public-private partnership approach. This is the Center for Water, Energy, and Equitable Economic Resilience, which is a mouthful. But you can go to that link there. I'm sure these slides will be shared. You can go check out what that center is about. Really, what the CBP3 approach is about, a new, more innovative way and more efficient and effective way to implement stormwater and green infrastructure at a larger scale, lower cost, faster pace, and to drive local benefits, jobs, and small businesses and whatnot. More to be said about all that, but you can go there to find that out. If you're a community and you want to find out more about this, you can go back, please. real quickly. I'll increase this pace, I promise. There's free technical support available. If you can go to the website there, the link that's shown there. Applications for communities, it has to be community leaders to apply for this. That's due on February 10th, so it's only like a week away. But please go check that out. And this is not grant funding. This is support that we provide to you to explore the CBP3. Next slide, please. Sorry, Martin. Okay, so why join? There's a lot of reasons there. I'm not going to go through all of these, but really the bottom line is, if you're a community who wants to be part as an individual, please let me know. If you're somebody who would be an affiliate member, would love to have you join us. Really, but the bottom line is that you can help us shape the sector. We are a relatively young, nascent sector, and we can help to shape the landscape as we move forward. A lot of other places, a lot of other sectors can't say that, or it's harder to do. We're in a good position right now to shape things as we move forward. Okay, you can go forward 2, please, Martinette. So, okay, so I'm going to talk about the sector maturation aspect of things. The first thing I wanted you guys to take away is that things are moving. We are maturing, and I'm going to show you some data points that reflects this up. So the first is that the ASCE infrastructure report card is something I would guarantee almost everybody knows about. It's on CNN, it's in the New York Times, and wherever else. It's something that's widely known and widely publicized. It happens every 4 years. Every time there's a administration or a new administration or just the same administration, but every time there's a term in office, the report card comes out. So the 2021 card is coming out. Never has stormwater been part of this as a separate category. It's been lumped in with wastewater, maybe water resources, something else, but it's never been its own separate thing. But we've been advocating for years for ASC to do this. They've been wanting to do it, and finally we got together the last couple of years and they agreed to do that. So for the first time ever, stormwater is going to have a grade. And it's probably not going to be a good one. Would love for you guys to check that out, be aware of it, spread the news. March 3rd, but from 11 a.m. to 4:30 on Eastern time, you can go and be part of the rollout of this. And there's the link there. It's free to sign up and register, and you'll hear about stormwater and other things. So that's a big deal. That helps us advocate on the Hill and other places. Next slide, please. So related to this is a series of national surveys focusing on the MS4 sector that WEF, the Water Environment Federation, has led. It's been great. We're a partner. We support them. We've been getting the word out, and maybe folks that are part of this engagement have filled out the survey. If so, then great. We appreciate it. This is the first time we've had any kind of statistically significant understanding and feedback and survey of the needs and the challenges of MS4s across the country. It's really helpful. So it's really interesting. There's 2018 information is already available. If you go to the West Stormwater Institute or the website, that's the link that's listed there. You can check out the 2018 stuff. The 2020 report is something we've been involved with. We've been helping with the analysis. That's coming out in a couple of weeks, the week of the 22nd or 23rd, whatever that is. So it's really great. I wanted to mention here that Second Nature has been working with NAMSA and with WEF to develop a web portal that allows you to slice data different ways. So if you want to look at this region or that region or that area or this question or that question, you're going to be able to manipulate the data to a certain degree and kind of come up with your own information, which would be really helpful. And you can see how things vary nationally versus your area or region. So it's a great thing, and I appreciate Second Nature doing that. Next slide, please. The other thing is that, funding is always comes with, that survey showed, the last couple of surveys have always, and every survey really shows funding needs are significant. It's a big challenge. California has especially acute problems with funding because of Prop 218 limitations, and also you guys are just doing a lot. There's a lot of that's being done, and the bar is high in a lot of places in California, but you have a tough time setting up local stormwater utilities. So there's a need for EPA and the federal government to provide funding. In fact, 2/3 of all capital investment for wastewater occurred during the construction grants program between 1972 and 1988 or so, something like that. The point is that federal government played a huge role and that's grants, not loans. It turned into a loan program. But the point is that there was a big investment from the federal government back then for wastewater. There should be something similar for stormwater, and we're advocating for that. EPA set up a task force to look at this, and the quote that came out of it said more federal funding is needed for stormwater. Plain and simple. So there's some recommendations included. I'm not going to go walk through those, but the point is that this is moving forward. And you might be hearing, oh yeah, we always talk about this. Something real is going to happen in this legislatively. It's going to create some significant amount of money. We're going to advocate for more, of course, but this is something that we're as an organization are pushing towards, and we are working with other organizations to do that. So this draft report has been done. It's going to go to Congress soon. We're going to send this out to the world. This is the kind of thing that we want to promote and let everyone know that this is going to be a helpful thing. Next slide, please. And related to that is the Stormwater Revolving Fund, or the State Revolving Fund, I should say. We're looking at a stormwater version of this potentially down the road, but the SRF program is something, again, that the construction grants program for wastewater started in the 70s, morphed into a revolving fund loan program, and only 3% of all the assistance has ever gone to stormwater, even though they're part of the Clean Water Act, they're part of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, but many states, most states, don't make it easy to do that. California is one of those that it's very rare to see SRF dollars go to stormwater. We're working to try to change that, and again, looking at different options. And we're also looking at this I talked about the CBP3 approach has been actually successful at getting SRF assistance. So there's a way to address this, and this is something, again, I wanted everyone to know that NAMS is focusing on this. You might say, why are we talking about this in California? Most states ask that question. This has got to change. Again, this has been successful for the stormwater, or for the clean water, wastewater sector. It's got to be successful. Stormwater, we're looking at ways to make that happen. Next slide, please. Related to that is are two really critical topics that are like fun, things that kind of flow underneath that. The first is stormwater utilities, and again, California is unique that it's very challenging to set up utilities. Some utilities exist but haven't been updated for decades, as an example. But it's just hard to get that set up, and I know that there's legal challenges, or there's been legal or state statutory changes that have made this a little bit more of a rosy picture, but we know that we still have to figure out about those court challenges that are going to come from this. The point is that it's hard to do. Michigan's another place, it's just illegal. You just can't do it, and other states are in the same boat. So it's challenging to do this. That's probably why only a quarter to a third of all MS4s have any kind of dedicated funding, through a stormwater utility or stormwater authority or whatever it is. And it's another reason that 95% or more of all funding for stormwater, and most of the water sector overall is like this, but it's even more so with the stormwater sector. So really the onus is on MS4s in this context. And again, that's why we're advocating for other options here. The big limitation here, just the point here is that if you don't have a way to, it's like trying to go get a loan without having a job. I can't go buy a house if I don't have an income to repay in the mortgage. It's the same thing. We are going to be limited in our small kind of pay-go type of view of the world if we don't find a way to set up a utility that not only is a functional local dedicated funding source that we can use to repay for large financed projects and investments, but it has to be high enough, has to be big enough for something that you can actually go buy the house you need to, as an example, instead of just buying something that you're like, well, we'll get this because we have to, but we'd rather have that because that's really what we'd like to have. So stormwater utilities is something that we're trying to focus on. I wanted to mention that because we're teamed with Second Nature to develop a portal for this. It's not been launched yet, but it'll be coming hopefully the next couple of months or so, or maybe 6 months or something like that. But it's going to be, it's on the horizon, and it's going to provide more information on stormwater utilities because we need to have more of those across the country. Related to that are asset management, and that really ties in with the talks today because a lot of what Second Nature is doing, along with Esri, is helping to establish asset management, that baseline. What do you have in place? And recent surveys, I talked about the WEF survey, they suggest about half of programs say they have an asset management program. I would guess that there's a fair amount of those that aren't really formal asset management. There's some kind of hybrid maybe, or an informal version of it. The point is we need to start really focusing on that. We don't really know what assets are out there. And go to the next slide, please. And I think that's my last one. And I want to set the table for the other speakers here, because the water sector overall is data poor. Stormwater is the worst of the worst when it comes to that. And that's nothing against us. It's just we're younger, right? We're still maturing. But we don't have any true idea of what our existing assets are. Again, think about asset management. We don't have an idea of the condition of these assets. Again, going to asset management. So we don't have the scale. We don't know what it's, if we knew the scale of it, we don't know what the condition is. Is a lot of it good? Is a lot of it bad? But you can look at the transportation sector. They can tell you exactly how many bridges there are and what condition they're all in. The reason is they have a national bridge inventory, and they're very standardized in the way they report and name and all that stuff. Their data, it's all standardized. And that kind of goes to the last point I wanted to make here, which is that data standards for stormwater assets will have significant benefits. It'll help us understand, get our hands around things. It's not people shouldn't be afraid of data. And that's what the other point I wanted to make here, because having a consistent set of standardized data elements for stormwater will help us as a national organization be able to take all this information and roll it together and say, look, we've got this many millions of MS4 conveyance. We have this many million BMPs. We can go to Capitol Hill, we can go to EP, we can say, look, we're a big sector. We have big needs. This shows that we've got our stuff together. We've got it figured out. We've done our due diligence. You got to help us do more investment. And plus, we're valuable. We're not some little piddly thing over here. We're not just drainage. We are stormwater. And it's also understanding your assets will help you facilitate financing. If I know what I have and I know what the condition is, that allows me to go out and do more municipal bond financing, for instance, things like that. So anyway, that's the last slide I have. I want to wrap up here. I'm going to have to take off after I'm done here. So if there's any questions, feel free to let Martinette know, or put in the chat function or the question function, and it'll come back to me. I'd love to answer any questions. Also, if you want to get on the NAMSA newsletter, there's a link that's shown there. You can sign up for that. They come out like once every couple of months. Just has national level information. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Jason.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Seth.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Seth. I think that was really great. It really sets kind of the stage for a number of things that we want to continue talking about today. So my name is Jason Yoho. I am the Chief Commercial Officer at 2NDNATURE. That means I spend almost all of my time working with customers in a variety of different capacities, whether it's working with Martinette and putting events together like this from a marketing standpoint, or whether it's talking to prospective customers about what their priorities are, what are the trends that they're seeing, how are they seeing their permits evolve, what concerns do they have about their capacity to satisfy new permit requirements as they're coming down. 2NDNATURE is based in Santa Cruz, so we're up on the central coast, just over the hill from Silicon Valley. I have 4 kids. We spend a lot of time in and around water. So from a personal standpoint, the mission that we have at Santa Cruz is very near and dear to my heart. Since the first .com, I've spent my entire career watching the cloud disrupt industry after industry, and I've really worked on trying to help customers understand how they can benefit from the cloud. Stormwater, as Seth was kind of alluding to, and did, I think, a good job kind of providing context around, the stormwater industry is going through a very interesting evolution right now. Really trying to become big kids and get to the big kids table is one way of thinking about it. And so that's a very common factor. It's a very common theme as the cloud kind of moves into industries. We see kind of a couple of common factors that indicate that they're ready to benefit from the cloud. Firstly, that they're going through that evolution. Secondly, I would say there's usually a highly fragmented industry. A good example that I like to look back on is the healthcare industry. It was not that long ago when we would go to the doctor and they would have to call someone for our records or ask someone to send them an email. My doctor relied on faxes for a very long time, up until the very last minute. He hung onto his fax machine. But now today, of course, that would be silly, right? We walk into a doctor's office, even if we were at someone's office earlier in the day. I just did this with my son, and they were able to pull up his records from the other office electronically. So this is what the cloud does. It moves in very quickly to industries that are ready for it, that are ripe for that. And thirdly, there's usually a number of external factors converging that are kind of creating this opportunity for the cloud to come in. Seth, I think, touched on many of them. Most of you, I'm sure, are aware of other factors that maybe haven't been mentioned yet that are contributing to this readiness, whether those are administrative changes out of Washington, D.C., or they're stimulus spending coming through from the COVID tragedy that are going to go through the state revolving funds, and some of them have been significant numbers of dollars have been earmarked specifically for green infrastructure. So Second Nature, we are in the business. We are a cloud-based GIS, Geographic Information System, enabled platform for managing stormwater program operations and demonstrating effectiveness for compliance purposes. So that's what we're going to talk to you a little bit about today. Our mission is to help communities benefit from their stormwater programs by enabling them to explain the return on investment associated with them. This is an image that we got on the right from the Nature Conservancy. They're a terrific partner. We're collaborating with them from a science standpoint. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. They're also an investor in Second Nature. But maybe I'll start by giving you a little bit of background about where we come from. Second Nature was founded in 2016. Our founder and CEO, Nicole Beck, has a PhD in aquatic chemistry and got her start up in the Lake Tahoe Basin, working with what is probably the largest clean water project in the history of the United States around Lake Tahoe. Lake Tahoe, of course, is famously clear to amazing depths. And what started happening is that the clarity of the lake, as we all know, started declining. So this very large, multi-state between California, Nevada, and the federal government program evolved to try and understand what was contributing to the declining clarity in the lake and try and put some science around how can we kind of measure our efforts to improve the clarity and the water quality in Lake Tahoe. So Nicole and her team, they were focused on understanding structural BMPs and the role that they play. And from that work came a number of models and methodologies that are very widely adopted in the stormwater industry today around understanding and coming up with ways to look at BMPs, understand how they're performing, quantify that performance in a repeatable, scalable way that is peer-reviewed, scientific journal published science that's at the core of not just the Second Nature platform, but our overall philosophy in the stormwater space and how we can help improve understanding the performance of these programs. Second Nature, as an early stage technology company, is experiencing really rapid success. We're now in 11 states. We've got over 50 customers. We do think very, very seriously about stormwater programs as having an ROI or being an asset to their communities that have long-term value. We also think about those structures in ways that a lot of other companies maybe have not started thinking about them yet. So we have an enormous number of green infrastructure assets, structural assets in our system at Second Nature, and they have about a value of over $5 billion at this day. I would say the reasons for our success are really threefold. Firstly, what I really want you to take away from our conversation today is this concept of science and the role that it plays in quantifying and providing certainty around understanding program effectiveness or the performance of a program towards reducing pollution, whether that's volume from a stormwater perspective or from a particulate matter perspective. Secondly, it's that we're based in the cloud. The cloud is a very powerful tool for breaking down barriers and for creating efficiency. And lastly, again, that we're based on maps. Stormwater itself, stormwater programs, its infrastructure are distributed by nature, and they're based on the landscape. Now, maps are a very powerful platform for communicating information to various stakeholders in ways that's very easy to understand. So we hold ourselves to the highest standard in science. We talk about open science. We hold ourselves to the highest standard from a partnering standpoint. We talk about an open partnering strategy and philosophy at Second Nature. We realize in your stormwater programs that it takes a number of different stakeholders, that you rely on them to help run your program on a daily basis, to help plan for the future, to help understand how it's performing. We are not a source of disruption at all. In fact, we have fantastic relationships with a number of public and private entities. We work with nonprofits like the Nature Conservancy, like NAMSA and Seth. And we also work with engineering consulting firms, both the very large firms all the way down to the kind of single person, one or two person, local and regional organizations. The way we look at the stormwater industry requires us to take a step back and understand where it's come from. Stormwater programs are decades old, going all the way back to just after the Clean Water Act. And what we see is stormwater programs often, as Seth did a really good job describing, did not have initially, and many of them still today, do not have their own source of funding. So they often rely on resources, services from other departments, other divisions within their municipalities. That means that that information often exists in different formats. It often exists in various levels of integrity or quality. And really, we want to think about these things as existing in workflow and information system silos. Those silos prevent stormwater programs from having easy access to information. They also make it difficult for stormwater programs to actually be a service delivery mechanism. So there's high costs, there's complexity, there's a lot of ineffectiveness that goes on. And so what we do at Second Nature is we really try and shift that paradigm. We want to make it possible for you to establish priorities, to establish metrics, and demonstrate program effectiveness. And we do that by shifting to a digital service delivery model, taking all of the assets of your stormwater program, putting them in the cloud, creating standards from a data standpoint, enabling people to be able to see information, get access to information quickly, easily. And so we really at Second Nature talk about stormwater programs evolving from being cost centers to being assets with long-term value and ROI. And we do that by enabling an ability for you to communicate program effectiveness and demonstrate performance of your program out to various stakeholders. So really putting the program at the center of a service delivery hub that's digitized. You're able to provide information, you're able to provide guidance, whether that's on a daily basis, what do we need to do today operationally or this week, or from a business performance and analytics standpoint. How are the various areas of the program performing? How can we communicate that effectively in a GIS or a map-based context to understand where opportunities exist for the stormwater program? We bring a number of different partners to the table from a technology standpoint, from a business standpoint. We work very closely with Esri. Esri, of course, they're here with us today. We're going to talk about them a lot. They're a global leader in the geographic information systems arena. Most of your municipalities already know this. You already have a investment likely in GIS. It's likely based on Esri. What we provide is an opportunity to really extend that over to the stormwater program, in a sense, give you a seat at the table to start not just consuming those services, that GIS capability, but really have control of your own destiny. Really start saying, you know, we have unique requirements as a stormwater program. We're going to implement our program in GIS. We're going to integrate ourselves with the overall GIS architecture that our municipalities invested in. Second Nature is highly qualified, of course. Even though we're an early stage technology company, we've invested from the very beginning at being a good partner and being a collaborator with Esri. So we have a number of certifications that really put us at the top from an expertise standpoint. And what this means is that gives us a platform between Esri and Second Nature to be able to talk about stormwater and bring stormwater to the table even in that relationship. As Seth alluded to, we spent a lot of time talking to a large number of municipalities and state regulators about their programs, what their current status is, where they're going with them. A lot of that boils down to talking about what's happening down at the data level. Data is really the foundation. It's the core for establishing kind of those higher level capabilities that I was referring to. In order to do that, we need to centralize data, we need to standardize it, we need to harmonize it, and Esri is a collaborative partner with us in that conversation. We bring on a weekly basis, we're collaborating with Esri. We bring all of our experience now, approaching 100,000 green stormwater infrastructure assets, about how those are being used, what common features, what common elements are they, how do we understand their performance. how does that data schema fit into a larger architecture? What that means is that it provides a very scalable platform for your businesses, a very robust environment to be able to discuss your workflows and how you're doing work and how information comes in and how information goes out. That is something we're going to show you a little bit later in our demo. Because we're based in the cloud, one of the real benefits is that we no longer have to talk about downloading software, installing things in data centers. There's no support and maintenance, a simple subscription, just like we consume software in our personal lives, whether that's an app on our cell phone or whether that's watching Netflix. It's a simplified model that's very powerful because the cloud allows us to not just access information from our desktops when we type in a URL to a web browser, but it allows us to integrate powerful remote and field applications. So the Second Nature platform in the field is based on Esri Survey 123 and collector apps. Information that's conducted in forms, customized forms, and collected immediately is either downloaded to the Second Nature platform or it's synced when cell phone service or coverage is regained. It's a very powerful integrated way of thinking about how data moves through and is leveraged by your stormwater program. What that all allows us to do is start to present map-based priorities that in the context of opportunities for the stormwater program, for the broader community, and even up to the watershed levels. You think about collaborating in new ways with some of the other partners, MS4 permit holders around your communities. So this is a typical way that we present those stormwater opportunities. We want to identify the greatest opportunities for improvement across various metrics, like where's the greatest amount of stormwater volume? Where's the greatest amount of pollution or sediment load in the environment? We can look at trash or litter and understand, how does the stormwater program, programmatically or from an infrastructure standpoint, where do the opportunities exist to kind of remove litter and trash from the community? But we can also start thinking about things that traditionally exist outside of the stormwater permit, things that are maybe community-based, like green space. If we want to create a new park, where's a good place to do that by investing and leveraging the investment of green stormwater infrastructure to create green space or canopy cover? Can we do that in an area of the municipality or in a neighborhood that's maybe socially economic disadvantaged? Or is there a way to do that where we can pull in local labor and workforce so that they're contributing to building out green space or putting green infrastructure in the ground? So really expanding the horizons of how we think about the stormwater opportunity, providing the platform to be able to communicate about that. And then lastly, really think of, here's just another way of thinking about it, which is, we take Second Nature and we take the cloud and science and we wrap all of that around the Second Nature and kind of map-based capabilities. And we provide a system of insight, a system of performance to understand what are your infrastructure needs, how do we communicate the benefits that out to the community, what is the long-term value or ROI associated with that, and how can we communicate that in a way that provides access to additional funding streams, that checks the boxes on requirements for additional funding. So now we're going to step back and we're going to show you how we do all of that specifically in a demo, and I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Michelle.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. So now I will share my screen and we can go over a software demo. All right. So like Jason was saying, our software platform is entirely cloud-based. So we're not downloading any applications on your desktop. We don't have to install anything in on-premise servers. Everything is accessible through a web browser. And then with our subscription comes user accounts, added support, maintenance, all the typical kind of software things. So I've logged into our software here, and you'll see that the first page that you see is this landing page. So the way that we've developed our software is that we've broken it out into different modules. And each of these modules are tied specifically to those stormwater minimum control measures. So you'll recognize tools like illicit discharge, construction site runoff control, urban outfall monitoring. These are all tools that you can use to manage your data, do your field inspections. So whether it be doing your weekly or your monthly construction site inspections, going out to record dry weather flow at your outfalls. All of these tools use GIS and mobile applications in the cloud, so you can effectively collect your data and not have to transcribe any data sheets or anything like that. Now, the cool thing about 2NDNATURE is that because we have that standardized data schema that I can show in a minute, we're able to do a lot of analytics and dashboarding and modeling automatically. So I'll also show you what the annual reporting side looks like of our tool, but basically we can pull in records of all of your stormwater assets, how many inspections you've done for the year, and we can start to incorporate that into hydrologic models, and we can look at trends over time. Another thing is that that's super helpful for your annual reporting. So when it comes time to submitting your annual report in California around October, we already have all the data for you in the 2NDNATURE platform. So you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to compile data and resources from other departments. It should already be there for you in the software. So then you can just click a few buttons, send the report off to your regulator, and then you're done. So I'll jump into our structural BMP tool here. And then as this loads, I'll turn off a few layers and kind of talk about our structure of the software. So you'll notice throughout our program is that everything is very geospatial. So everything has a location. The main focus of this tool is a map of your MS4. So the demo account here, we're looking at the city of Watsonville in California. I can kind of zoom in and out. It knows my location. I'm in Santa Cruz. And right off the bat, what we do with, if you were to become a customer, is that we pull in GIS layers related to your stormwater program. So here I have the MS4 boundary of the city of Watsonville. I can then pull in a streams or rivers layer, and then we can actually denote which ones are on the impaired water bodies list through a 3D. And then I can turn on an outfalls layer. So this is something that I can either import from ArcGIS Online, I can upload an existing layer, or I can actually inventory these in the field using our mobile applications. And then lastly, I can also upload our storm drains. And now I can really get a pretty good visualization of how water is flowing throughout your city. I can keep an inventory of these assets. And again, this can be synced to ArcGIS Online, so you're not having to keep 2 copies of GIS layers anywhere. And so what we actually do as part of our software is we use all of these GIS layers, and then we use local topography and other publicly available data sets, and we help you delineate drainages within your MS4. So what you see here on this left-hand side, these are all the sub-watersheds within the city of Watsonville. And then as I highlight it, you can see that it's showing each of these sub-watersheds that are actually broken out into urban drainages. So if I click on this, we can view all of the drainages within the Watsonville Slough sub-watershed. And we can see that these are specifically delineated using storm drains and outfalls and whatever other infrastructure data that we have about the stormwater system. So immediately, not only do you get to see everything on your map, but we're also linking that urban landscape to the receiving waters to which your MS4 is ultimately draining. So that really lays a pretty good baseline. And then we can start to layer other GIS information, assets, whatever it might be on top of that. So I'll turn off a few layers here, and then I'll turn the structural BMP layer on. So again, this is our structural BMP tool. This can be utilized to inventory all of your stormwater assets. So these are any publicly or privately owned BMPs, permanent control measures, whatever you might call them, that are designed to treat stormwater. And what we've done, part of our research in the Lake Tahoe Basin, beginnings of Second Nature, is that we did a lot of research on these structural BMPs, on these assets. How are they being designed to treat stormwater? And so with our research, we developed actually a standardized typology of all of these structural BMPs. So we have a standardized type on, if it treats water through infiltration and particle capture, it's going to be a bioretention. So our software not only includes the tools to use for the field assessments or inventory, but it also includes our data standard and our BMP typology. And with that, we've also developed a set of really rapid field assessments, which I'll get to in a minute. So you'll see here, we have points on a map. We know where these structures are. So if I click on a point, it'll bring up a pop-up of various information about that BMP. If I click on view, this can give you guys a really good overview of how we record and collect all of the data related to these structural BMPs. So here I can drop a point on a map. Again, we can pull information from ArcGIS Online. We can import existing databases, whatever it might be. And once we have those points on a map, now we can pull in other information about that. So if it resides on a parcel, we can pull in your parcel assessor's numbers, unique identifiers. We can look at street addresses, tell you the exact latitude and longitude. And then we can start to associate it with projects within your city. If I click next, so this is really our kind of standardized data schema. It's pretty comprehensive, but the idea here is that we have that standardized BMP typology here. So these are all the different BMP types that we've typed specifically on how it actually treats stormwater. We can then have different workflows in the software depending whether or not it's publicly owned versus privately owned. So we can record land ownership. We can look at specifically how the BMP was designed. So how many inlets and outlets does it have? If it's something like a treatment vault, we can record the manufacturer, the type of model number. And then we can also upload files associated with this BMP. So this is super helpful if you're a new field inspector. We can upload the design plans, operations and maintenance agreements, whatever it might be, to help those people in the field either locate the asset or really understand how it was designed. And then that way you're not, having to go back and forth between file management systems. It's all there for you in the platform and in the cloud. Another really cool thing about our tool here is that we actually have a GIS capability to delineate drainage areas for you. So here I have my BMP on the map, and I want to figure out what area drains the BMP. So I can take a look at those design plans, and I can actually draw polygons in my system right here. So I'm not having to flip between GIS and Second Nature. I can just draw it directly in the platform here. I can save that here, and we can see that we can automatically calculate the area. We have the impervious area that can be pulled from an existing data layer. We can also calculate things like priority land use. So if it's a trash full capture system, we can load your priority land use layer in here. You can see that a portion of this does drain your priority land use. And if I click save, all of this gets saved to 2 different GIS layers. And then again, we can push that to ArcGIS Online if you want to do additional analysis on it, or push it out to public-facing dashboards, whatever it might be. It's all saved for you in the cloud. So now I've got my structural BMPs on a map. I know the type, so I know how it treats stormwater. and we've delineated the drainage areas. So that's what these colored polygons are in a map here. The other most important thing that we need to know about our stormwater assets is how is it doing? Is it being maintained? Can it treat stormwater as it was designed? So again, going back to our standardized BMP typology, along with that is we've also developed really rapid field assessments that are tied to specific BMP types. So for a bioretention, we want to make sure that the vegetation is still alive, it's not dead or overgrown, that the inlets and outlets are able to receive and distribute stormwater. So all of these assessments, again, are part of our kind of data standard. And these applications, again, work on mobile devices. It's mobile responsive, so you can use it on iPad, Android. It works on any device, really, with cellular connection. And so the cool thing about our assessments is that we've designed it to be a scoring method. So we do our quick assessments. We're looking at ponding depth. We're looking at how fast it can infiltrate a known volume of water. We can look at the soil, so making sure that it's not compacted clay or anything like that. And then, of course, looking at inlets and outlets, making sure that nothing's clogged or broken, because if those don't work, then obviously they won't treat stormwater as they're designed. And then, like any good field application, we can upload photos of the field here. And we can take any notes relating to that assessment here. And now if I hit this calculate score, this will create a score between 0 and 5. So this is taking all the observations that we've done in the field and providing you with a quantitative assessment. So a score of 5 means that it's performing well, maybe it was just maintained or installed, whereas a score of 2 or below really just flags it for maintenance. So something's up with the assessment, maybe you need to do some maintenance, replant some vegetation, unclog an inlet, whatever it might be. So if I hit save here, this will automatically update it in the cloud. We can view a full history of all of the assessments that we've done for that BMP for that reporting year, past reporting years. I can look at all past photos as well. So other assessments that I've done, anything like that, you can download files. So if I zoom out for a minute, now we have a map of all the structures, where they're located within your MS4, the type, so how it's treating stormwater, we know the drainage area, and now we know their condition. But that map kind of has a lot going on. So what we've done is actually take it one step further, and we've created these different to-do lists. So if I click on this tab here that says maintenance due, what this is doing is basically filtering and querying your data and showing you your top priority assets, ones that have a low score and have the most relative water quality benefit. So if I click on this BMP at the top, we can see that this has a score of 2.4. So something's been flagged, maybe an inlet's clogged, whatever it might be, but it drains 55 acres. So right off the bat, we know like this is going to treat a lot of stormwater pollution or volume, but something's up, something's not working correctly. So this can be a quick way to notify your public works crew, your maintenance crew, whoever it might be, that someone needs to go out and maintain this. Now on the flip side, if I look at the BMP at the bottom of the list, obviously still very important for water quality, it's a bioswale, but we can see that it drains less than an acre. So this is still a maintenance priority, but lower on your list. You should definitely get to that wet basin that drains, 50 to 60 acres first. So now we know where all of our assets are, we know our maintenance priorities. So now I'm actually going to switch gears a little bit and show you what our reporting and our modeling can do. So if I go to our annual reporting tool here, what this does, again, is automatically pulls in all of the data that you've collected in our field applications and our data management tools. So here we have two different sections, really. One looking at your program compliance. So this gives quick statuses of how many structural BMPs you have in your system, how many are functional, how many new ones you've inventoried. We can do really quick table and chart summaries of what you've done for that reporting year. We can do the same thing for all of the other minimum control measures. So looking at outfall maintenance, catch basin cleanings, street sweeping programs. But then the pretty cool thing about our reporting is not only looking at the compliance side, so what did you do, how many assessments did you make in the field, but now looking at your program's actual impact. So trash reductions is a great example, or runoff and particulate reduction. So looking at the water quality benefits from your program. So I'll go into this particulate reduction tool here. And I'll actually switch to this inputs tab. So what we've done and what's built into our software here is a hydrologic model. And so what we pull in locally available soil information, impervious data, land use, and then we use local rainfall. So we combine all of that together and we're able to estimate average annual stormwater pollutant loads and volume runoff. So we look at the natural landscape and we can estimate baseline. So what would be the amount of pollution that's running off the landscape if you had no stormwater practices or BMPs in place? So if I go to this opportunity tab here, we can take those modeling results and actually aggregate it up to those drainages that I was showing earlier. So the drainages are colored by its relative pollutant load. So the darker areas are showing areas that have the highest relative particulate loads. These are the ones that have the highest amount of pollution running off the landscape. Could be due to high impervious, highly developed areas like commercial and industrial areas, whatever it might be. This gives you a really quick view and opportunity map to see where I should implement green infrastructure or other assets like street sweeping, whatever it might be. So here we can see for the demo account in Watsonville, they have a baseline particulate opportunity load of about 315 tons per year of particulates. But we know from just looking at the structural BMP tool that they've already done a lot of implementation. They have these stormwater ponds, they have green infrastructure, maybe they've implemented street sweeping as well. So because that's standardized and we know where those assets are, we know how they're treating stormwater, and we know their condition, we can actually incorporate those structural BMPs and those assets in our pollutant loading model. So if I go to this progress map here, zoom out a little bit, what this is showing is kind of the flip side of the opportunity map. So now that we've incorporated our structural BMPs, street sweeping, other programmatic elements, this is looking at those drainages that have the highest implementation of stormwater assets. So if I click on here, this is showing a drainage that has, baseline load of about 9 tons per year of particulates, but with implementation of street sweeping, structural BMPs, they're able to actually reduce their load about 64%. And so we can model runoff disconnection, street sweeping against centralized BMPs, whatever it might be, on this drainage scale. And now the really cool thing about Second Nature is, again, because it's standardized, we know where everything is, we've done our catchment delineation, we can actually break that down one more step. So we can look at the Watsonville Slough, for example. That's a highly impaired water body in the Watsonville area. It's got a lot of TMDLs. So now we can look specifically at this drainage and see what they're doing to reduce their particulate loads. So here we can see they've reduced their particulate loading, the pollutant loading, about 30%. And we can see a lot of it is due to street sweeping and runoff disconnection. Now that's great, but say they implement street sweeping and a lot of BMPs down the road. How can we see their progress over time? cool thing about us is that we can timestamp everything and kind of track your progress over time. So if I click on Watsonville Slough here, and then I go to this chart, what this is showing is basically what the map is showing, but in a time series. So now we can see City of Watsonville over time as they've implemented green infrastructure, other stormwater treatment ponds, they're reducing their particulate load to about 20 to 30% in 2020 and 21. We can do the same thing for the entire city, or if we want to start to look at other subwatersheds, other drainages within the city, we can query that as well. And if we're worried about flooding or just sheer volume of stormwater, we can also model, again, runoff volume reductions. So really easy way to kind of track your program's progress against water quality goals. If you have certain milestones that you need to hit or certain goals, we can put that in the platform here and kind of see where you are relative to different water quality goals. So now when it comes time to submit your annual report around October, I can go back into reporting here. I can check the boxes that I'd like to submit to my regulator. I can hit submit report here. And what this does is really lock your records in the platform. It creates a read-only portal for the regulator to log in. And now they can kind of go in and query your data, do their own analysis, and not have to send you any audit requests or anything like that. So really great for digital annual reporting and record keeping. And so with that, I think I'll stop the demo. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I think our emails are in here as well. So if you're interested in seeing a customized demo, please let us know. So yeah, thanks, Martinette.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah.
Really, really comprehensive software demo. And yes, I did actually put a link in chat for everyone. If you do want to request a software demo, please go ahead. We'd love to hear from you. But now I'm going to hand it over to Francis. Francis is going to talk a little bit more about Esri licenses. Hi, Francis.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much, Martinette. Hey, everybody out there. I'm really stoked to join the party today and be part of the impetus behind moving us from the kids table to the adults table. I'm always part of those type of conversations from a big family, kind of getting that move and really creating that move and using that as an analogy of where we're going today is really cool. So, you know, I really have to thank Michelle for her amazing demo today, because as she stepped through the demonstration of capability, showcasing Second Nature's offering in the cloud, it reminded me of why we're so passionate about partners like Second Nature. Because at Esri, we talk about the science of where, and Michelle showed this deep science and deep understanding that had location attached to it, right? And at Esri, we talk about that a lot, the science of where, and we engage with our customers through partnerships like Second Nature to ensure that science is getting out to our customers. So we think a lot about that. And thanks so much to Michelle for creating that science of where, and the team, of course, at Second Nature. But then we also talk about the knowledge of next. And then last year we went to market and talked about seeing what others can't. And if you really think about Michelle's demonstration today, the concept of understanding, appreciating, and looking at your stormwater programming and be able to communicate that is very much aligned with where Esri sits today and where we see our vision of the future. So sorry for the long intro, but it inspired my thinking for the presentation today. So my job today was just to kind of attach Second Nature and Esri together. And I wanted to provide some of you with an Esri overview, because I'm sure many of you have heard about Esri, but really don't know some of the things that make up our organization, and understand that while we may be big, and talk about that on my next slide, or this first slide here, if you go forward, Martinette. You know, we started in this business some 52 years ago. And really our goal is to be the leader in geographic information systems. And as you see here, we have a lot of offices. We have a huge global footprint. But if you continue to double click on Esri as a global company, global or as a regional organization, and then we get really local. So we have offices in Northern California, Southern California. When we do go back to the office, work out of the office here in Louisville, and we really look to our customers and serving those customers for 51 long years, and really as a connecting point between Second Nature and ourselves. We got our start in services, and just like Nicole and the team, they were doing great things to keep Tahoe blue, and really adapting science and repeating that science, and that expressed a product. And really for the first decade of Esri's tenure, we did that. We did a lot of services work, and that services work started to become product, and we started to use what we have now, which is ArcGIS. So while we might present ourselves sometimes as this big global organization, make no mistake, we are local, we are regional, and we want to really work with and have close relationships with our customers and our partners. So as we look at the next slide, we kind of talk about by the numbers, and a lot of the numbers that we talk about here are steeped in our customers' use of ArcGIS Online, and that's the instantiation, the cloud instantiation of ArcGIS as part of our geospatial infrastructure, as we call it, that we can be in the cloud, we can be on premise, we can be in hybrid. So those patterns are very much adapted. So as you look at our customers and their adoption of mapping and location, you can see an amazing amount of folks who are using our technologies, adapting more mapping and location into their everyday workflows, and depending on location in everything that they do. And as we talked about today, and as Michelle showed it, location matters when it comes to your work in stormwater management, and being able to understand what you have out in the field and express and communicate that up. And as you can see here, and a lot of this, the big news about Esri in the last 12 months has been around the COVID dashboards, Johns Hopkins University standing up that dashboard, and all those views are really based in our cloud instantiation of ArcGIS. So you can really know that Second Nature in their work with Esri has depended on an organization who really showcases a really good foothold in the cloud that you can depend on. Other great big organizations do as well. So the next slide we'll talk a little bit more about kind of the customers we serve. And as we look at, over 350,000 customer names representing millions of individual users, you can see here that because of the kind of tools that we provide, and it was interesting, early on in Michelle's demonstration, she actually said, all the things you'd expect from a common SaaS platform. And that was music to my ears, because what basically Second Nature is doing is saying, we're going to depend on Esri for things like the security and identity model. We're going to depend on them for this great, robust mapping and location, and really ensure that they're going to keep us healthy and safe in the cloud. So as you know, we support all different types of users out there, whether that be on-prem or in the cloud. And those could be executives, analysts, data scientists, marketing and sales, operations, mobile workforce, developers. So this whole community that now is even more dependent on mapping and location. And that has really grown out of what I look at as the consumerization of IT. If you look at what you do today, you really depend on location when you do things every day. And that consumerization of IT is hitting us in mapping and location. And the good news here is through our relationship with Second Nature, they're leveraging all that goodness. So you can have an executive who just needs to view a dashboard and not really edit anything, or maybe there's a different viewer that needs to edit some things on that existing result, and kind of pass that back to someone who might say, oh, okay, I have to make a different decision or address something out in the field with that asset. So we serve all different levels of the organization, and the good news here is Second Nature adopts that and brings that to you in their instantiation of their cloud-based offering for rural all the way up to large organizations. And in my next slide, as we look kind of at industries and business needs in our relationship and maybe your journey, if you look here at the industries we serve are really across, right? I work in state and local government, one of the largest industries we serve here at Esri, and you can see national government, defense, and intelligence. But if we look closely at these business needs, and I live in the place where I want technology to solve business problems. So I think a lot about those business needs. So if you look at today's trends, Second Nature is helping you with asset tracking and analysis. They're also looking at that field service management. There's some works of logistics and fulfillment to understand your BMPs and what you're doing some performance monitoring, and maybe you're not doing real-time location tracking, but you are tracking that location, and maybe there is an aspiration to do that, but know that we have the tools and technologies that Second Nature can leverage, and something like Velocity to get you that up in the cloud. And you look at tomorrow's opportunities, and this could be where your journey takes you. into things like operational efficiency, risk management, and here in site analysis and territory planning are all things that I feel like this better together story that we've created, Esri and Second Nature coming together for the customers in the stormwater management space really have depended on. So I really thought this was a great slide to kind of talk about today's business needs and tomorrow's opportunities, which could move fast in some people's world. So as we go to the next slide, we really want to talk about, our technology at Esri is very broad and really spans all of the things that we do with mapping and location enablement. But I'll say, just like Second Nature, they focus, and our focus is on creating software that our partners and our customers can leverage to solve those complex geospatial problems and provide data as a differentiator and maybe look differently at how your program is going, who that's affecting with deep demographics. So all the geospatial capabilities you can unlock, and our partners like Second Nature have been able to unlock in whether that is a broadly open application or even a very focused application for and in support of what we're talking about today is understanding and appreciating where you are with your compliance and sharing that with your community. So our technology is broad and deep, and that's the cool thing about Esri is you can start small and grow very, very rapidly or just evolve like your program should evolve, and we'll work and grow with you as we have with Second Nature. Next slide, please, Martinette. So at Esri, especially in the cloud, we have a living atlas. We have made enormous investments in having data for you to harness and add into your system of record, and really look at that as I look at more layers, more information we can pull out of those layers to really inform better decisions. So we have all sorts of data for decision making, demographics, environmental data, base maps, and imagery. Especially imagery is now becoming more commonplace and could help with that field analysis that you want to do, that and really that price and that cost and that investment in imagery is going down. So there's a lot of readily available free imagery and then for fee imagery that you can start to use in our living atlas. And then of course, location services, anything with geocoding, geo-enrichment, and routing is right there for you to pull from it. And recent announcements around that space have made it even more open for even developers to just really pull using an API key. That's what I call a different talk show. Next slide, please, Martinette. Thanks so much. So as I mentioned earlier, Esri has gotten its start in GIS, but over the past few years, and kind of driven by that consumerization of IT, we really have been kind of pulled into being leveraged. That GIS system of record, that map maker that's always been there in the office, now is getting called in to say, hey, we need to provide some location intelligence and mapping solutions for the greater organization. So the markets we serve are still that tried and true GIS system of record, and that system of record gives us a system of insight and then a system of action and a system of communication. So when I look at the markets we serve, GIS will always be there. It's foundational for us, and we've talked about that in our demonstration today, is setting that system of record so then you can showcase those maps and start to build that location intelligence about your stormwater performance, or really looking at how we're performing, what good looks like, and setting some goals to get there. So on our next slide, we kind of go through, if you look at how we go to market and how we serve our customers with our software, and every day we sell software, that's what we do at Esri. We sell enterprise agreements that offer different tiers of government as much as they can consume for that tier of a government over a term, so they can have access to all of our commercial off-the-shelf offerings. We have bundles that are specific to industries that might be for water, say stormwater, and then we have product offerings that we call geo-enabled products. Some of those might be things like urban for urban planning and city engine for sharing those urban plans. And of course, we have a complete portfolio of services. It's my job for you to understand that Esri is a software company at its core, and we enable our customers by serving them with that software. And of course, we have managed services, consulting, training, and e-learning, but that's a very small portion of Esri's business. The larger portion is really the wealth of software that we provide our customers and partners. So on the next slide, I really wanted to kind of capture a slide that Jack Dangerman, our founder, was showcasing in our CIO summit, and then he was talking on a TED Talk recently. And if you look here, really where we come together as partners in support of you, our customer, our shared customers, is we're providing that process and a framework together to measure, visualize, and map those assets, provide some analysis and maybe some modeling, look at planning and design for the future, aid in decision making, and then take some action. And when you look here at the bottom right, and I'm sorry, I took some notes because I was in another conversation with Jack and wanted to bring this up, is that understanding precedes action. And when we look at that, that is what you want: understanding, action, and then communication. And it really starts with that data model that brings it all together. And Second Nature and Esri have come together using that stormwater data model, and they're providing input and they're providing collaboration for us on that data model. So when you start with a SaaS offering from Second Nature, know you're starting off with the data model that they're depending on. Or if you use the data model from Esri, you're in good company because Second Nature's products can lay right on top of that. So you're really in good company as far as this kind of measurement to action continuum that I saw. And I just wanted to make sure that I capture that for you. Sorry for reading notes. I'm usually not so scripted, but I thought it would be a good kind of closing of the zipper, if you will, between Esri and Second Nature. On the next slide, I just wanted to really provide you with, when we go to market with Esri, when partners go to market with Esri, we really want to kind of select those partners who have a good energy, that are really following what we see as the benefit and the value to our end customers, because that's what we truly value, is customers for life. Esri didn't get to 50 years by kind of selling a software box and then running away. We had the benefit of being a privately held, debt-free organization born and raised in Southern California because of how we do our business. And that's been, selecting the right things to do at the right time and really valuing partnerships. And when we go to market with partners, if we look at this next slide, I just want to inform you that, especially with a partner like Second Nature, we've really decided that all of the things that we do with partners, marketing and sell with Esri teams, meaning we co-sell. Jason and the team, we've worked with some pretty large DOTs locally here in Colorado and some other areas that are really leveraging Second Nature and ArcGIS together to come out with a better together story. So they market and sell with our teams directly and have that trust of a trusted advisor that we so value. And then on our next slide, what we're talking about today is their ability, Second Nature's ability to license specific capabilities that they know are enormous value combined with their scientific APIs, or excuse me, their scientific intellectual property, and they're delivering that to you in a SaaS application. And as Michelle said, all those common things that come along for the ride, it's good news. They're depending on Esri, our security model, our data models, all those things are right underneath the cover. So they're depending on those capabilities that you can trust for the test of time. So that solution delivery licensing enables partners like Second Nature to provide that SaaS solution to you in a very secure environment where you get to kind of be in your sandbox for your own compliance activities with your MS4 regulation. So if we go to that next slide, the other part is sometimes a customer says, hey, you know what? I actually want Second Nature, but I really want the benefit of the full use and all the capabilities of ArcGIS. And the good news here is that we've entrusted Second Nature to go to market with us in that model as well. So we're really close friends. Jason, Michelle, and I talk on a very regular basis. And the good news is that this relationship comes together in support of our customers, whether you need a SaaS application or a full use license, or you're going to take a SaaS application and take that journey, and that may evolve. You're with the right partner. You're going with the right data and data model to affect your evolution and your process as you go forward. So really, I didn't want to get you too far into Esri's business with our partners, but I thought it would be good thinking for us today to ensure that you knew that Second Nature's ability to work very closely with Esri and really identify and work with different tiers of the government has been not only successful but also sustained. So I think that's what I kind of wanted to talk about today. But remember, at Esri, we talk about and appreciate partners and customers who believe in the science of where. And as we saw today with Michelle's demonstration, we look at that science of where, and then we take that science and we look at the knowledge of next, and then we see what others can't. And a lot of the times with MS4 compliance here in Boulder, Colorado, stormwater is really important to me. Water runoff is really important. And sometimes when you pass by a culvert or pass by a ditch, you see something, you might perceive something, but really it's that data and that rich understanding of the data that you guys can collect and begin to present to the community through our technology and ArcGIS Hub that can say, hey, now you have an understanding and can kind of put your finger on the pulse of what's going on with your stormwater in your own community. As we know, and certainly the certain events over the last couple of years have certainly affected this, but transparency is no longer something we're requesting, it's something we're expecting. And the good news here is that on the journey you take with Second Nature, with the science of where, the knowledge of next, and really being able to see what others can't and then communicate those findings and those outcomes to the public or to your constituents is really something we can do together. And that's that better together story that the team at Second Nature and Esri have put together for you guys, for the customers. So thanks so much to Michelle. Sorry for, I did pay attention to her demo this time, Michelle, as I do every time, but I guess, it really struck me today more than ever. So thanks very much to Martinette. You're such a great adult supervision for us. I always appreciate your time. So thanks, and I'll drop.
Thank you so much, Francis. And Francis, you can actually stay on for me on video. And if Jason and Michelle would join us, it's time for the team to have a little discussion about how to get started with a digital solution like this. Thank you. Over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Martinette. I just want to take a minute to thank everybody. Seth had to jump off, but the National Municipal Stormwater Association is a tremendous partner. Seth is obviously extremely knowledgeable, so much gratitude out to NAMSA and to Seth today. Francis, thank you for that. That was terrific, and Michelle, it was a wonderful demo. So, what we want to talk about next is just kind of the idea of getting started, right? Which is, we spend a lot of our time at Second Nature working with Esri, having those conversations with prospective customers. We're going to take kind of the conceptual now and boil it down to the practical, right? What really happens? I think what we can say up front of course, you see kind of the collaboration, the level of integration between the various team members here. We can say up front that, getting started starts with having great partners. We're obviously all here to ensure mutual success, and working with MS4 permit holders to kind of get across the line you're gonna have this wonderful team and all the resources that we bring to the table behind us. But from a practical standpoint, what does that mean, right? As you're sitting and you're thinking about your program and you're thinking about, okay, this sounds great. I'd love to have control of part of that GIS destiny and integrate that into how we run our program on a daily basis, and from a kind of a long-term business planning perspective and performance analysis perspective. But where do we start? And I think that the first thing we like to talk about is the idea of risk. We're talking about, some innovation in our industry. We're talking about doing things just a little bit differently. We're not talking about major changes, actually. We're talking about incremental kind of small changes. But when we think about risk, I think the important thing to consider is, well, let's quantify what we mean by risk. And so that's what we tried to do here, is talk about data, operations, and business risk. But more importantly, don't be afraid of risk. Change is not a bad thing. The cloud has made every industry, hands down, that it's transformed a more efficient, a more productive, and ultimately a better industry kind of across the board. And the same is happening in water, big water, and certainly in stormwater. We see that the cloud is helping people understand their business in ways that they've always wanted to, that they always knew, but it's providing them that insight, and maps are an enormous part of being able to do that. So one of the questions we often hear is, when we're talking to someone, is they're like, wow, this is all great, but we have to be super data ready to be able to move into this consideration. And the reality is regardless of whether we're talking to an organization that is very mature or has many resources or has been investing in GIS for years, or an organization that's just at the very beginning of considering doing that, There is no wrong time. In fact, right now is always the right time. And that sounds maybe a little bit like a pitch, but from a practical standpoint, we've found that to actually be reality. And so maybe that's something that we can talk about both from a Second Nature and an Esri perspective.
Well, I think from the get-go, if you have assets out in the field, take that first step, right? Is what you're saying, Jason, is like we need to start the process of plan, do, check, adjust. And it really just starts with getting data ready. And I think sometimes really we can be almost analysis paralysis or afraid of that beginning step of just saying, hey, let me get my assets under management and understand what I have. And as we talk about sometimes, you know, there's no such thing as bad news because now we have a baseline. And then when we have that baseline, we have our assets under management, we can start to say, okay, now what do we look like as far as that delta and how do we get there? And I think a lot of customers do thrash about that because, you know, it's kind of like starting a running program. How do you start? You just go, right? Like and it certainly isn't easy, but as you go, you get better, right? And that seems to be what we're not letting perfect get in the way of better when we look at those initial steps. And I think that's a lot of the things that when we come together as Second Nature and Esri is that, hey, let's get that initial step. You're not alone. There's scaffolding and infrastructure that Second Nature has for you to really have that data put into a space and place and start to build that up. But I quickly get out of my skill set, Michelle, and enter yours, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Francis. I mean, Michelle, how many times do we talk to a prospective customer that's kind of looking at their program, looking at their data? Data is often the place where these conversations start, right? Because data is the foundation for everything that we're talking about. How often are our customers ready when we start working with them, or is their data ready?
Yeah, I feel like that's something that is said in almost every customer conversation I have, especially talking with new prospective clients. They're saying, oh, I would love to use GIS or Second Nature, but my data is just not ready. And yeah, I think our response to that is data is never really ready. I mean, technology changes, regulatory requirements change. You just kind of have to, like you said, Francis, hit the ground, just start running, like use something to start, you know, inventorying your assets, whatever it might be, if you don't have it in GIS. And then the tools that we have in place in Second Nature and GIS increase the data integrity, like your slide is saying here, Jason. Once we have that baseline, then we can continue to iterate on the quality of the data. We can decide what is important to collect. So yeah, I mean, I would argue that data is never fully ready to be used, and it's just such an iterative process of collecting and inquiring.
Well said.
And that's what I mentioned earlier. Sorry, Jason, that perfection is a journey, not a destination, because you can have a timestamp with your MS4 permit and say, hey, we did really well, but that permit is ever evolving. And that's what the reason why we talked about not only the sense of place and space with your own MS4 permitting, but being able to leverage that great power of mapping and be able to share some of those outcomes across regions, start to share best practices and kind of tease out those things we talk about. So a lot of agreeing to some data standards. And it kind of reminds me, I was reading this morning about the grid modernization that we talked about in utilities like 8 or 10 years ago that's really come, you know, and depended on the cloud, and Esri's part of that. But it feels like a lot of what we're talking about is the very beginning steps of that talk about digital transformation, moving from paper to digital, and then starting to kind of do that grid mod. And I thought that's been exciting times for the utilities, the electric utilities, because it represents great work that we can all do together. And digital transformation is about getting you guys back to work out there and you know, resolving some headaches so you can say, okay, can look at maps. Sorry, Jason, I didn't mean to interrupt, but some of the things are just so top of mind when I was reading about the history of grid mod today. Sorry, I'm geeking out, but
I appreciate you pulling in the coffee reading this from your breakfast. You know, that's helpful. You know, both of you make great comments. I think what, you know, not to be redundant and repeat what you said, maybe just to riff on it for a second, I would say you know, data represents a fundamental category of risk for any any system, stormwater systems included. What we have found is that when we dig into the data layers and we look at kind of the workflows that sit on top of those, leaving things kind of as they are usually represents far greater risk than saying, let's take a step and move towards centralized standardization, harmonization. That's going to give us the ability to kind of control that the destiny of that data and understand how the workflow, the work management that sits on top of that influences it. And so over time, once we have kind of our hands around the data and we're able to understand the impacts that the work management workflow has on top of that, we actually find the data integrity increases over time, right? Not changing, kind of relying on the status quo, what we actually find is most organizations, by the time we're talking to them, they're struggling with kind of a realization, a harsh reality that their data integrity is decreasing over time. And that manifests itself in different ways. It manifests itself as, not having access to things, or data disappearing, or not being able to close the loop on things, and ultimately from a business perspective, it makes it nearly impossible, really impossible actually, to be able to measure things from an effectiveness standpoint. So, risk is an important thing. Maybe if we kind of move on, Martinette, and we say, okay, what other considerations should we be thinking about as we're thinking about transforming or shifting or embracing the digital service delivery model? And one of the themes that consistently kind of comes back at us is this idea of fitness, considering fitness. It wasn't that long ago in the stormwater industry, and this is still very common, in fact, where people are building kind of custom built stuff from the ground up. And they're saying, you know what, we have some people, we have a little bit of tech, we're going to start putting that together, maybe work with someone to kind of build something that's purpose built. And what the cloud has shown us decade after decade is that we need to move away from that. That represents significant risk in itself. And the risk there is fundamentally not about data, it's about fitness. And this is something that Nicole Beck, our founder and CEO, who is a scientist, does all the time, which is make sure that the problem you're trying to answer, that the solution you're bringing to the table is appropriate, that it fits where you're going. And so I would say that there are kind of a few pieces to fitness as we're thinking about digital transformation or digital service delivery models and effectiveness solutions or systems for stormwater programs. And that's one is, make sure that, the design of what you're trying to accomplish matches the problem. That's where the second nature of science obviously comes to the table. We want to be able to measure program effectiveness over time. We want to be able to quantify that with certainty, meaning the numbers mean something. Then we have to have a science at the core of what we do. If we want to be able to communicate complex information about a distributed system, distributed architecture, we need to be able to do that in map-based technology, right? It's the only communication mechanism for doing that. And we want to tie those things, of course, to what is the reality that permit holders are faced with is their permit. It needs to be directly applied to their permit. We crosswalk those permits. We make sure that there's a tight level of fitness, and we're able to demonstrate that over time. And I think that that's a topic that both Esri and Second Nature collectively and separately can really lend a lot of credibility, a lot of value around is this idea of having a high level of fitness. And I'm wondering kind of how you two think about that.
You first on that one, Michelle.
Yeah, okay. I guess my thoughts on that, I get using the cloud in any kind of aspect of your life, whether or not it be stormwater or no, your job, but even in my personal life, the cloud is great because it's so easy to update and iterate over time. Like you're saying, if we have customized software that requires ongoing maintenance, it requires someone on site, to update the servers, whatever it might be, and that's just not sustainable. That's not scalable. It's going to fail eventually, whether it be now or in 10 years. So the cloud is a great solution for all all new things in your personal and in your work life. And yeah, and the great thing about Second Nature is that our purpose is really looking at stormwater programs and their effectiveness. So we're purpose built, like you're saying, for helping you comply with your stormwater permit, whether it be in California or other states across the nation. That's really our end goal.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Michelle. I think that those are both all meaningful comments. Francis, not to leave you hanging out there, maybe another way of thinking about it is, Esri obviously for decades has thought about how to communicate complex information in this format, right?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, when we look at the growth of Esri's market, it's been largely in the cloud and cloud-based solutions, right? It's been where we see the greatest growth as we look at on-prem and portal, and then our ArcGIS Online instantiation of the same. That system has always been where we see a lot more customers coming in. And when we look at our communication to our customers, we talk about configure first. Like, we don't want them to get down to the code level, because that is going to disrupt their ability to maintain and keep pace with Esri. So when I look at this concept of consider fitness, that's why we came together, is that the knowledge that Second Nature brings to the table in the science to deliver those outcomes to a customer in a secure environment that they can manage on their own, or Second Nature can manage, is really kind of the bell of the ball. And it depends on the technology we're just using every day, right? I got this phone. It's so funny that our personal lives, as Michelle mentioned, our lives are so cloud-based, and then we look at our business, I'm like, well, we have to have that on-premise. I'm like, well, why? Like, you're depending on so many things out there, like your whole personal life, this consumerization of IT. We're just joining forces with that and ensuring that you're getting that same benefit. And that's, gosh, just that Johns Hopkins dashboard, the COVID dashboard worldwide. I mean, that shows we've got uptime, right? Together, the uptime is right there. Yeah,
and those are important. That's an important trend. I think you're right. It's, as we see the cloud come in and really start enabling industries, what we see is we see a kind of a rapid, migration away from kind of, building things in a custom way and going towards kind of off-the-shelf solutions for all the right reasons, right? They're more cost-effective. They can be implemented much faster. They're less fragile. They're more scalable. I mean, they've got kind of all of these characteristics to them. A good example, not to date myself too much, because this wasn't as long ago as it might sound when I say it, but when I started in Silicon Valley in this industry, I was working for one of the really large tech firms, and we were selling an email system. It's one of many things that we were selling to the Fortune 500, and the vast majority of them were building their own email systems, their own email platform, right? So, yeah, exactly. That sounds absolutely crazy today when you think about it, right? But why would you do that? But that was a big business. There were, people were building those things because it hadn't, kind of the cloud hadn't been fully adopted yet. It hadn't fully kind of migrated into that space yet. And then in a matter of a couple of years, there was no one doing that anymore, right? It had transformed. So I would say, if you're considering kind of what the role of cloud and GIS is in your program, and how to kind of think about planning for adopting and embracing it, be aware that fitness means a number of different things, and that really what you want to think about is not trying to hold on too tightly to the way things were done in the past, but to kind of be open-minded around, there's kind of a wave of things happening here. There's a little bit of risk because there's, it's a little bit of unknown, but you can minimize those, you can mitigate those by having the right partners and by using the right tools as you move forward. So maybe that's
Jason, there's a comment that I'd like to make, is that if you think about it, collaboration, we say it as collaboration moves at the speed of trust, right? So yep. Those of you on the phone today, you've realized this kind of back and forth between organizations that really have this high value and trust, right? That's our partnership. And then when we look at that circle of trust, if you look back at Second Nature's case studies, you can start to see the organizations that they've already worked with and the case studies they have. So we can kind of have that trust circle closed with, Second Nature has trusted Esri, and we in turn have trusted them. And there's some great customers out there who have leveraged this purpose-built off-the-shelf solution for their own needs. So we can kind of talk about that, and really this collaboration starts with you who are on the phone to say, hey, I've got some data. I may be a little shy to show that, but Michelle told me everybody's data is kind of bad and perfection's a journey, not a destination. So I may as well get started, right? And sometimes that shyness for that concept of data fitness, you've got to get started. And I think last night we were talking about the facts are friendly even when they stink, right? I mean, even if they're not the best facts, we have them, we can see them, and we can start to work toward that vision of what better looks like. Sorry, Jason, it just struck me on that that collaboration thought. So
it's spot on, and I think that comes through in our discussion and all of this, that there's a high level of trust here, that not only do we have similar visions, but we've really I think over the past couple of years figured out how that we can trust each other, and that we've built that, and that extends, of course, what you're saying, Francis, to the customers that we work with, and if any of our existing customers are listening, we're really grateful for you, and they all know that, and we appreciate that relationship. Maybe this is a good transition, actually, Francis. I think you set us up for the final slide and for the final topic, which is I'm really going to try and drive this down to, so what does this mean? Where do I go? How does this begin? And I'm going to do that in two parts. First is, what we're really fundamentally talking here, by starting in the data and looking at workflows, and we're talking about kind of, how does the stormwater program kind of get a seat at that IT table, at that GIS table, around that architecture discussion, right? Many GIS programs, even in some of the very largest municipalities that we're working with in the country, they may have one or two or even more, people in the stormwater program who are GIS people, but they're usually not the ones driving that architecture discussion. They're usually not the ones driving that integration discussion. And so oftentimes when Esri and Second Nature, when we come together and we start working with them, a lot of the time that we spend is around enabling them to come up to the big kids table and say, okay, we want to drive this destiny a little bit. We want to establish our own requirements, and in fact, we want to set the requirements from kind of a various different levels, so that we have visibility into the future and input into where this is going. And I think what this slide really talks about is, part of that is having a data integration conversation, Francis, around what are the various ways that Esri and Second Nature can kind of work together. Now, you mentioned kind of from a licensing perspective, that's kind of the mechanics of how things get done. But down below that, there are kind of obviously technical considerations around, can we work with them regardless of where they are, from a GIS perspective, right? And are there various options available for how we integrate them?
And there are the different ways that I spoke to of the way we integrate with the Second Nature platform is very complementary to our customers, because you can start your journey out with a SaaS-based pointed solution. And if you have if you discover on the other side, hey, Public Works has some things we want to inform or hydrate some of the decisions we've made over into their group, that's totally possible. And the concept of even the theory of even graduating from a point solution to a full use license is also realized by these models. At the end of the day, really what we want to do is start with that, getting that asset under inventory, right, and being able to showcase that. So as you can see here, I love the data integration options, because this is the better together story that we can create. If you look back at your own organization and say, hey, we're a kind of a green field, we don't have much in the way of Esri or GIS assets, or we kind of have a lot of Esri here and we want to kind of complement that. The more we can all work together to ensure that GIS becomes an IT first class citizen is really the great work we can all do, driven by the data you have out in the field. So I like the 1, 2, and 3, because we can actually bring you guys together evolutionary through from where you are today all the way to where you might be in the future. So
yeah, very well said. And it's number 4 here on this slide is, that's kind of we do have a detailed conversation we can have around data transformation as well, and we'll get to that maybe in another webinar or another session. But Michelle, just to make this really down kind of the practical level now, what we find is kind of a spectrum of folks who, when they're thinking about, okay, I want to do this, this makes sense, I'm gonna start moving in this direction. Some of them want to kind of work in a self-service model. They want to kind of get access to information, best practices, tools, guides, those things. Others at the far end of the other spectrum really want kind of someone who can hold their hand and take them across that line together. Can you talk a little bit about how they can do that with us all?
Yeah. So what you're kind of alluding at is part of our implementation process at Second Nature. So when we get a new client or someone who needs help, we'll walk them through each of those kind of permit sections. So what tools do they want to use in Second Nature? What's their end goal? How do they want to accomplish that? And then we can walk through them with their current workflow. So are they currently using ArcGIS Online? Maybe they don't have any processes in place, and we can start to pick out which one of these data integration options makes sense for them. So maybe it's just getting started in Second Nature, and then they can push all their data out to ArcGIS Online later down the road once they feel comfortable using GIS. Whatever it is, we have a lot of kind of self-service documentation and knowledge base available through Second Nature, so they're not having to rely on, you know, giving me a phone call or anything like that. All of that's available.
1-800-Michelle.
Yeah.
1-800-Michelle
is that.
you guys have provided to the community based on, you know, the plan, do, check, adjust, and the voice of the community, the scaffolding and infrastructure needed to, I wouldn't say not necessarily hold hands, but ensure that data fitness can be just started, right, Michelle? It's like, hey, you're not in this. One of the other messages is you're not alone, folks, right? Like you're not just getting, hey, here's a login and see you later, upload your CSV. No, there's some really good, you know, some massaging that has to be done, you know, if you know, as we all went out, I'm sure everybody had great behaviors in January and they're all gone now, but you know, they'll help you with continuing to, you know, set and achieve those goals and have that vision over time, right? So you're not, you know, that scaffolding infrastructure, I think that's the best thing that I see from you guys outside of that COTS offering is, hey, you're going to be able to not only get the value and benefit of what happens in early times, but because the maintenance, you don't have to reinstall something and everything like that. That to me is like, that's so much heartburn. You'd be like, oh yeah, I have to install something. Or wait a minute, I can't do my job. I have to hit sorry.
Well, this has been really helpful. I think you know, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I haven't seen a note from Martinette, but I'm sure it's time to transition to kind of a Q&A format. There she is. So why don't I go back and hand it over to you, Martinette.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I can see we did get a question here. So I'll throw it out there. I like what I hear, but I have old school management. Can you help me communicate the value of digitizing our stormwater program to city leadership?
Yes, that's a great question. You're gonna have to tell me who submitted that later. Very good question. In fact, that's just to riff on that just for a second before I answer it, because there's a really succinct answer, I think, at least as a starting point. But what we have found is, you know, getting kind of the electeds, whether that's you know, your city mayor system or city manager or council system, or it's just departmental kind of senior level people who are not elected, getting them involved in the process, I think, is critical. What you want to do is you want to be able to obviously kind of drive a requirements and a value statement kind of, you know, with the key stakeholders, but you really want that kind of that air cover from a few champions in your municipality who can kind of come in and say there's a larger picture at stake here. It's not just about running the program on a daily basis. That's where we spend, you know, 99% of our time with Esri and Second Nature, working with our customers, is helping them just run the program on a daily basis and making sure that we've got a platform that really does that exceptionally well. But the bigger picture is where we started this conversation off with Seth, and a little bit what I talked about and how Francis kind of laid the groundwork for what Esri can do. And what Michelle showed you in our platform is we can really start articulating an ROI. We can start articulating benefits in ways that allow you to extend that value statement that the stormwater program delivers to the community. And having those higher level stakeholders involved is very important to getting these things across the line. So the short answer to your question is we will go ahead and put a link in the chat here or you can find it on any of the links here down below that Michelle has for the regions of Southern California that we put together. We have a white paper. It's actually a joint white paper that we did with Esri, and it is topical. It is not product-based at all. So I don't think we talk about Esri or Second Nature products at all in that paper, but it talks about how, what are the considerations. It goes into greater detail than we have even here today, and it brings additional considerations into the table, and it's really targeted at kind of that big picture value proposition and how to get going. The white paper is very easy to read. I think it's 6 or 7 pages, but it's very accessible. It's really written in a nice tone and in a nice way. It is the #1 downloaded asset between Second Nature and Esri around stormwater. So I would encourage you to start there. Take notes. More than half the folks that we end up talking to usually have that white paper literally in front of them with notes in the margins, and that's the foundation for our conversation. So it's a great place to start, and then we'll go from there.
And I think it also, the white paper is great because it goes beyond just talking about a situation and a problem, because we all know that's why we came together today, is that there is something inherent in what we're looking at with our compliance, be that in or out, and we want to make sure that stands the test of time and evolves with the upcoming regulations. So if you look at it, I often think if I put my internal sales hat on, it's not just the situation and the problem, but the implication of that problem that gets the attention of that senior leader. And that's what we tried to tease out with this white paper, saying, hey, it's not only we all came together because we see the situation and this problem, but it's the implication of the problem to that leader, to the constituents, to the community that we want to come together on. And you can go ahead and say, hey, listen, you want to have an easy button and kind of a set it and forget it when it comes to stormwater management and starting out getting assets under inventory, starting our process and getting going will kind of resolve that, or be able to have you as a leader be able to point to that thing and say, hey, it's always at the ready for me to get a data set, to get that dashboard, and to understand where I am today. And that, I think that's the big thing, is that oftentimes we go through this discussion internally, we're like, hey, we got this situation, we got this problem, and everyone's like, yeah, it's a problem. Well, what's the implication? What's the loss of, what's the loss of trust from your constituents? What's the loss of money because you're paying fees to a program because you just don't know what you don't know yet, right? I mean, Jason, this is what we struggle with as an organization as we outbound sell, but it also is the challenge of inbound selling. It's that implication, and when we understand that implication, we can say, well, we have a need payoff in this combined solution that has mapping, it has kind of set it and forget it in there, and has some scaffolding and infrastructure that we can get started. Maybe I had too much coffee this morning, Martinette. I'm not sure.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, Jason's on his way. Thank you for that, both of you. And I think this is probably a Michelle question, this next one. And we have about 3 minutes left. So Michelle, how much of our historic program data, like construction inspections and street sweeping records, can we still use?
Yeah, great question. So usually when we get a new client, we can work through what their current workflows are, like I mentioned before. We can get a really good idea of how they've collected data in the past. And then we can do what we call crosswalking. So we can take your old data, we can translate it into our new data standard, our new data schema, and keep that, because you've spent probably millions of dollars developing a system on how you can collect those data on construction inspections and street sweeping programs. So we want to use that, and we can incorporate that in Second Nature. So we'll go through some kind of data transformation process with you guys and make sure that it can fit into Second Nature platform.
Terrific. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
And I think these are all the questions we have. So I think with the 2 minutes to spare, I just really want to thank all of you for joining us today. Huge shout out to our presenters, and of course to Seth, who couldn't stay to the end. We will be sharing out some resources with everyone. So please look out for an email from me early next week. I will be sharing all the links that Seth had in his presentation and information relevant to what we discussed today. You can see in this last slide as well, I popped the link in for requesting a software demo, a one-on-one software demo with Michelle. Please feel free and use that if you want to chat to us a bit further, as well as some specific permit information for your region in Southern California. So feel free to click on those and learn a bit more about your specific permit for your region. And with that, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Francis, Michelle. Lovely to see you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope this was useful. We'd love to hear from you. Don't hesitate to send us an email. We'd be happy to chat. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.